The ceiling fan spun lazily, stirring hot, humid air in the cramped hotel room. A single bulb, its filament wavering, cast a sickly yellow glow across rumpled sheets and a battered suitcase at the foot of the cot. Muhammad Ali sat on the edge of the bed, head bowed, fingers drumming against the coarse cotton of his trunks. Outside, Kinshasa's dawn had not yet broken. The city slumbered under a thick blanket of heat, broken only by distant shouts of early vendors and the low hum of generators. He closed his eyes and tried to summon the familiar flicker of fire in his belly, that burning confidence that carried him through every fight. But now, days before stepping through the ropes against George Foreman, that flame felt smothered beneath a mountain of expectations. The world called him the greatest. Here, in the heart of Zaire, he was meant to be more than a boxer. He was a symbol, a beacon for a nation striving to assert itself on the global stage. The crowd's cries of Ali Bomaye, Ali, kill him, echoed in his mind, but they no longer stirred excitement. Instead, they weighed on him like lead. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, had warned him. The pressure here was unlike anything he'd known. Mobutu's government, the promoters, the Western press, all had vested interests in this spectacle. Ali was not just fighting a man, he was fighting a tangled web of politics, money, and cultural pride. He let out a soft exhale and rose, his limbs heavy as he crossed to the window. He pushed aside the thin curtain and peered down at the street, where a handful of children chased a ragged soccer ball between parked trucks and battered sedans. Their laughter sounded almost out of place against the backdrop of crumbling plaster walls and shuttered storefronts. One boy broke from the pack and recognized him. "Ali! Ali Bomai!" he shouted, leaping into the air. The others stopped and echoed the chant, the phrase carrying across the courtyard like a pulse. Ali felt a pang in his chest. Their faith was so fierce, so raw. They saw him as more than a man. He was a living legend, a testament to what one person could achieve. Yet at that moment, his body trembled with doubt. He was tired, exhausted by travel, by media appearances, by the relentless anticipation. He closed the window and leaned his forehead against the cool glass. The sun had not yet risen, but already the heat of the coming day seeped through. Later that morning, he shuffled along a dusty alley toward the medical station set up by Zaire's health department. The narrow corridor reeked of disinfectant and sweat. A nurse in a faded green uniform administered his EKG. The nurse's gloved fingers pressed against his sternum, checking for irregularities. The doctor, a tall man with weary eyes and a stethoscope slung around his neck, frowned as he listened. "Your heartbeat," he said quietly, "flutters like a wounded bird." "This is not a game, Mr. Ali." The words hit him like a jab to the ribs. He was supposed to enter that ring Taurus strong, unbreakable. But here, in the sterile hum of fluorescent lights, vulnerability lay bare. Ali swallowed. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The doctor hesitated, then on impulse reached out and patted Ali's shoulder. "Trust your body," he murmured. "It tells truths that your pride cannot deny." Ali offered a half smile and nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility press against his ribs as surely as Foreman's gloves would. He gathered his bag and stepped back into the corridor, where a line of local staff watched with wide eyes. No autographs were asked, no cameras flashed, only the steady click of his own footsteps. Returning to his hotel, he paused by a wall decorated with propaganda posters, painted scenes of Zairean workers building roads, farmers harvesting manioc, smiling faces proclaiming the nation's strength. He thought of how quickly an idol's fall could become a cautionary tale. The expectations of a people, the hopeful cries for triumph, they were a double-edged sword. A champion carried their dreams until the moment he missed his mark. Then he carried their disappointments too. Back in his room, Ali stripped off his training gear and sank onto the bed, the spring beneath him creaking under his weight. He ran his fingers through damp hair and stared at the ceiling fan, its blades blurred by motion. The silence pressed in around him. No children's laughter, no distant drum beats, only his labored breathing and the hum of electricity. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard Angelo's calm voice. "You're not just fighting a man. You're fighting every challenge life has thrown at you. Remember that." Ali closed his eyes, recalling nights with his father in Louisville, the soft glow of a single lamp in their cramped living room. His dad patted him on the shoulder after a backyard scuffle, whispering, "You can't let them see fear, champ." But perhaps the real test was letting fear speak, acknowledging it, then quieting it. The morning sun broke over Kinshasa just as Ali slipped into the corridor behind the hotel. The air shimmered, red dust swirling in the shaft of light. He walked without purpose, lost in thought. Children followed at a distance, chanting softly, "Ali Bomai." He didn't turn to face them. With each step, he felt the tension coiling tighter, a storm gathering at his core. The world expected a fierce fighter. Today, he had to find something deeper, a calm in the hurricane, a stillness in the chaos. And only then could he stand toe-to-toe with the big George in the ring, not as a symbol forced into greatness, but as a man fighting for his own peace. He felt the canvas tremble beneath his boots the moment the bell sounded, a dull echo in his chest that blended with the muffled roar of 20,000 voices. The first round had begun, but to Muhammad Ali, it was as though time moved in slow motion. He stood in his corner, shoulders coiled beneath the thin nylon of his trunks, heart drumming a solemn tattoo against ribs still sore from his recent illness. Across the ring, George Foreman's shadow loomed, massive, effortless. Yet under the glaring lights, the younger man's knuckles trembled just a fraction before he lunged. Ali's vision narrowed. He heard the heavy slap of gloves meeting leather rings, the frayed hum of the overhead generator, the whir of the cameramen's flashbulbs suspended like silent fireworks at the edge of sight. But his own breathing, each gust of air drawn through clenched teeth, became the drum he followed. In that moment, he scanned the ring, rope stained with sweat, forearm clutching drip lines of perspiration, the tiny welts forming at his temples. He measured distance as a metronome, shifting weight from heel to ball, ready to pivot. Foreman struck first, a lead right that landed against Ali's guard, forearms grinding together with a crack that echoed around the arena. It wasn't the power that surprised Ali. It was the hesitancy. Foreman pulled back mid-motion, eyes widening as if he had expected triumph in that one punch, but instead felt only thick resistance. In the same heartbeat, Ali recalled a scrawny 10-year-old boy in Louisville, bruised knuckles turning to dust against a bully's jaw. His father had pulled him from the scuffle then, words languid but clear. "You fight smart, or you fall stupid." He carried that memory through every bout, but tonight it came alive in the glow of Kinshasa's lights. Foreman pressed, advancing with a flurry aimed at breaking the ropes loose from their turnbuckles. Ali absorbed the blows along his ribs, each hit a reminder that the storm outside this ring was nothing compared to the one he carried within. Yet he did not lunge back. Instead, he leaned into the clinch, met George's bulk with gravity, and let the ropes bear the force. The referee's shouts faded to a thin crackle, and Ali's mind turned inward. Feel the pressure, then release it in measured increments. When he broke free, he pivoted on his lead foot, shoulders rotating like oiled hinges. His jab, light but precise, snapped against Foreman's cheek, but it was more a message than a weapon. I understand you now. George's shoulders slumped for an instant, a dull ache blossoming behind his ear. Ali sensed relief wash over him. The first round siege was not a passage to despair, but a test of endurance. He raised his chin, inhaled that charged air, and let the bell's clang pulse through every nerve. In the corner, Angelo Dundee rattled the bucket of ice water. He caught Ali's eye and nodded, a single gesture that meant, "You're reading him." Ali leaned forward, arms resting on the ropes, and let a bead of sweat roll down until it met the canvas. He tasted it, salty and affirming. The crowd's volume surged again, but he felt the pattern beneath it, their faith, his legacy, the weight of expectation. All of it folded into the gentle rhythm of his pulse. As he padded back to his blue corner, Ali's fists remained low. He didn't feel a triumphant spark, only the steady flame of resolve. This round had not been about overpowering George Foreman. It had been about knowing when to absorb and when to let go, about transforming each blow into an opportunity to learn. He touched the tape on his wrists, pressed his gloves together, and inhaled deeply. Outside the ropes, the roar of voices swelled into something like prayer. Inside, Ali stood calm, ready for whatever the next bell would bring. He had crossed the threshold from mere confrontation into understanding. The fight had truly begun. He shifted his weight back, letting the ropes cradle his spine like the cradle of a mother's arms. The second round had barely begun when George Foreman unleashed a sledgehammer jab to Ali's midsection, blast after blast that sounded like iron rivets being hammered into a hull. Yet Ali did not flinch. Instead, he slumped against the taut ropes, shoulders hunched forward, chin tucked low. His gloves rose to shield his face, forearms thick barriers absorbing the impact, each collision reverberating through his bones. He inhaled through his nose, counting the seconds between blows, treating each strike like a toll paid into a hidden ledger of endurance. Around him, the arena's clamor morphed into a distant tide, waves crashing but never reaching his inner shore. He could sense the tremor in Foreman's fists, the muscle fatigue building beneath the surface. The young challenger's expression flickered, an unspoken question in his venomous glare. What is he doing? And Ali's answer was inaction. He rocked with the ropes, a pendulum swinging away from danger and then back, guiding each punch to land against willing flesh rather than surprise the universe with a wild counter. In the corner between rounds, Dundee leaned in close. His voice crackled with urgency. "You bleeding? Easy on the hooks." But Ali shook his head, chest heaving, mind alert. He dipped his forehead into the bucket of ice water, taste icy against his tongue, and heard the trainer murmur, "Keep letting him punch himself out." There was a calm conviction there, an unspoken strategy that seemed to come from some ancient well of pugilistic lore. Ali rose, sprayed his mouthpiece with saliva, and spat it out in a fine arc, eyes blazing with intent. The third stanza of the bout began as the buzzer rang. Foreman lunged again, hands thrown in a fury of impatience. But Ali had already anticipated the rhythm. He pivoted on the balls of his feet, rolled his shoulders under a sweeping right hand, and brought his guard high to intercept a left hook. The net effect was a muffled thud and the crack of leather on leather. Foreman's head snapped back, just a hair's breadth from losing balance. Yet Ali did not press the advantage. He shimmied closer, leaned into the ropes, and let George's own inertia drive another blow into the canvas rather than his body. Amid the controlled chaos, Ali's mind drifted to that first taste of adversity. Scraps in Louisville's alleyways, the sting of sandy gravel under bruised knuckles. He remembered his mother's soft voice telling him, "Stand your ground, but never get stuck." He had carried those words through every gym, every championship, every roar of approval. Now, they guided his every breath, every stance. He was no longer just a man in the ring. He was the sum of countless lessons in restraint and resilience. From the corner, one of his seconds barked in near panic. "He's wearing you down, Ali." But grief and fatigue had a new meaning here. Ali felt neither. He felt power, quiet, inexorable power, coursing through each limb. He sensed Foreman's guard slacken, the rhythm break. A final salvo to his abdomen landed off target, the glove sliding harmlessly along his ribs. In that fleeting moment, Ali rotated his hips, shifted his weight onto his lead leg, and drove a quick 1-2, jab to forehead, right cross to jaw. Light taps, not meant to knock out, but enough to fracture Foreman's focus. The crowd caught its breath. Foreman staggered back, the air knocked from his lungs. He swayed, fists lowering for a fraction of a heartbeat. That was all Ali needed. He stepped forward, feet silent on the canvas, and whispered under his breath, so softly that even the roar beyond the ropes stilled, "Now you know." Then he drifted away, back into his corner, letting the ropes cradle him once more. As the round drew to a close, Ali's chest rose and fell with steady grace. He touched his gloves together in salute to his own body's mastery. Foreman retreated to his own corner, armor dented and spirit rattled, eyes wide with grudging respect. The seconds ticked down on the timer, and Ali pictured himself in the quiet of his own mind, standing not as a champion, but as a man who had learned to turn another's strength into his own salvation. When the bell rang, Ali straightened. Sweat shimmered on his brow, muslin trunk soaked through. He gazed across the ring at Foreman. No hostility, only understanding. Each man carried scars. Each man sought his truth. In that suspended moment, as drums of applause and shouts swelled once more, Ali knew he had shifted the fight from fists to the realm of spirit. And that, he realized, was the real knockout. He leaned into the ropes, forearms pressed against the taut cables, head bowed as though carrying the weight of every roaring soul in that arena. The sixth stanza of this clash began with a hesitation from George Foreman, so uncharacteristic it froze the world. His massive shoulders sagged, breath rasping through parted lips, his gloves dropping to midriff only to rise again mechanically, out of ritual rather than fire. The bell had chimed, but what followed felt like a suspended heartbeat. Ali watched him closely. The flickering lights overhead cast sharp shadows on Foreman's gaunt face. Eyes glazed, fatigue sculpted into every line. Each inhale was a tremor, each exhale a confession. Against the ropes, Ali's own chest rose slowly, measured. His gaze never wavered. It wasn't triumph or malice, merely soft understanding. Then Foreman shuffled forward as if determined to land another blow. Yet his advance was labored and uncertain. He bent low, bending toward Ali's guard. Not to strike, Ali realized, but to speak. Against the roar of the crowd and the slap of gloves on canvas, Foreman's voice emerged, unexpected as a secret. "It's the end." Those three words ricocheted through Ali's mind. He allowed himself a faint, quiet smile, so gentle it could have gone unnoticed. Not mockery, but recognition. He saw that fear in Foreman's whisper, the echo of some private uncertainty. In that split second, Ali's world unwound to a memory buried 6 years deep. He felt again the hollow chill of a darkened dressing room back in '67, the night he lost his title. The room had been silent, the lights unlit, and he had been alone, just a young man staring into the void of his own doubts. In that hush, he vowed he would return not merely to fight, but to stand unwavering, to become the measure of his own convictions rather than the echo of another's decree. Here in the ring's cradle of ropes and heat, That vow ripened into purpose. Ali straightened, shoulders finding their ancient breadth. He did not respond to Foreman's words with fists, but with presence. He lifted his chin, the smile lingering as a benediction. His gloves eased upwards in a salute, not to announce a flurry of blows, but to honor the moment when humanity triumphs over brutality. Foreman stood motionless, brow furrowed, as if the world had shifted beneath his boots. He raised his own gloves in imitation, a soldier forced to acknowledge the academy in surprise. Then he exhaled, the rhythm of his chest loosening, the haunting of that quiet word echoing his own breaking. The crowd, sensing the fracture in the spectacle, grew eerily mute. No cries, no gasps, only the soft rustle of canvas underfoot and the distant hum of lights overhead. Somewhere in the dim stands, a man collapsed to his knees, clasping hands to mouth, powerless to cheer or cry. The fight, it seemed, had transcended itself. Ali's gaze remained on Foreman. No cruelty, only compassion. He planted a careful step forward, his footfall soft against the canvas, and closed the closing distance. No roar erupted, no referee intervened. The two fighters, titans of flesh and will, hovered in that thin seam between combat and communion. Foreman's gloves lowered, weight slumping, strength sapped not by a knockout, but by the revelation of his own heart laid bare. Ali, standing steady, placed a gloved hand gently upon Foreman's shoulder, an unscripted gesture of kinship. The resounding silence became its own voice. Then the final gong summoned them back to duty, but the hexagon of ropes felt less like a prison and more like a portal to something holy. Foreman retreated, eyes watering, as Ali drifted back to his corner. No shouts followed him, only an echo of stillness so profound it sang. In that pregnant pause, the fight had delivered its true blow, not to body, but to soul. And Ali, who had mastered every style, every jab and feint, had chosen the supremacy of mercy in the moment where all expected violence. The sixth round closed not with fury, but with a quiet that roared louder than any crowd, an affirmation that sometimes, to win, one must first lay down the gloves and listen to the unspoken word. George Foreman's legs trembled beneath him, but he refused to slump, instead launching a flurry of body shots as though to prove his will remained unbroken. Each punch fell slower than the last, the leather gloves thudding hollowly against Ali's guard. The opulent lights above seemed to flicker, as though the arena itself held its breath. Inside Ali's skull, every sensation sharpened. The slight give of the canvas underfoot, the faint wheeze of Foreman's exhale, the collective hush of 20,000 souls. He sensed the tipping point but did not rush. His own fists hung loosely at his sides, the gleam of sweat on his knuckles catching the lights like faint stars. A man in the front row, a slender youth clutching a tattered foam finger, leaned forward, mouth half open, eyes wide. His father, beside him, gripped his shoulder, unable to look away. The child's face shone with wonder and dread in equal measure. For them, this was more than sport. It was a revelation unraveling live. Foreman advanced again, wild and urgent, but each swing lacked its initial roar. His movements, once the epitome of raw violence, had grown hesitant, as though he questioned every blow. Ali studied these faltering arcs, his distance measured precisely, his posture relaxed, almost inviting. Then, in the ghost of a heartbeat, Ali bent his knees and pivoted, delivering a single left hook to Foreman's midsection. It was not a crushing blow, but an echo, a statement. He could have hit harder, but he chose restraint. Foreman's knees folded, not in agony but in resignation, and he sank to one leg as though gravity itself conducted an orchestra of humility. The referee's arm shot downward, but before the count began, Ali stepped forward, gloved hand raised. He cradled Foreman's chin, lifting the fallen champion's gaze to meet his own. There was no triumph etched on Ali's features, only recognition of shared battle, of two men who had come to this sacred crossroad. A sudden roar erupted, not boos, not cheers, but a symphony of relief and awe. Some in the audience wept quietly. Others, stunned, remained still, mouths agape. The announcer's voice crackled through the PA system, muffled by emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, the winner by technical knockout, Muhammad Ali." Yet the words felt superfluous, like labeling a sunrise. Back in his corner, Ali sank onto his stool, breathing slowly. His trainer dabbed his brow but did not speak. No instructions were needed. Ali closed his eyes, hearing still the soft tremor of the crowd, the distant slap of gloves and the rapid heartbeat echo in his ears. This round had been fought on another plane, one of spirit, of choice, of mercy. Meanwhile, Foreman rose, unsteadily pushing himself upright. The referee guided him to his corner, but Foreman did not waver. He turned his head and their eyes met across the ring. Foreman nodded once, barely perceivable acceptance in that tilt. No bitterness, only respect. As the ring cleared, Ali rose too. He crossed the ropes and offered both arms, encircling Foreman in a brief, firm embrace. The two legends stood chest to chest, sweat-soaked and chest-thumping, a tableau of reconciliation. Cameras flashed, but the moment resisted documentation. It lived more deeply between them than any film could capture. Ali stepped back, removing his gloves slowly. He held them at his side, fingertips brushing the leather. Then, with a single deliberate motion, he tucked them under his arm and raised Foreman's hand. The gesture sparked a fresh wave of applause, this time unbridled and universal. Foreman, still blinking, shook his head as if waking from a trance and raised Ali's hand in return. The crowd rose as one, a standing ovation that transcended the boundaries of race, politics, and the brutality of sport. It was an ovation for humanity. In the afterglow, Ali retreated down the ramp, his chest heaving gently, eyes clear and focused. He did not celebrate with wild gestures. His stride was steady, each footfall echoing the slow cadence of a man who had discovered that true victory resided not in conquest but in commiseration. Backstage lights glared harshly, dressing rooms echoing with distant cheers. Ali paused at a mirror, fingers brushing his brow, then his heart. He touched the corner of his mouth, feeling the faint edges of that quiet smile, and he knew this night would be remembered not for the thunder of punches, but for the hush that followed, a silence louder than any roar. The arena lights dimmed further as George Foreman lay prone, not collapsed by force, but by the slow surrender of muscle and will. The referee dropped to one knee and commenced the count, though every eye was fixed on Ali, standing still, arms at his sides, torso heaving with controlled breath. The swell of anticipation had become its own quietude, each inhale and exhale amplified in the hush. No music swelled, no trumpets blared. In that pregnant pause, counting, ticking inside every watcher's chest, Ali bent forward, sliding a gloved hand to his left knee before pressing himself upright. From his corner, the trainer's cloth slapped damply against his back, but Ali did not turn. He had asked for another beat of time, and now he was taking it. 2, 3. In the crowd, a lone boy sat motionless, eyes wide behind thick glasses. He clutched a program to his chest, knuckles white. His mother, seated beside him, pressed her hand to her mouth, tears tracking quiet lines through the grease paint and smoke. Even the TV cameras, poised for the triumph, hesitated. The broadcast feed lingered on Ali's profile, on the curve of sweat trailing from his brow, catching the low amber glow. 4. 5. Foreman's eyelids fluttered. He forced himself to rise, to the astonishment of onlookers who braced for another flurry of blows but found none. Instead, Ali's gaze softened, a look beyond victory or defeat, one of compassion distilled in the crucible of combat. He raised his chin and locked eyes with Foreman, as if acknowledging not an opponent but a fellow man who had carried his own burdens into the ring. 6. 7. The trainer, hesitant, raised Ali's arm. It hovered mid-air as though time had looped on a single frame. The count continued, a formality in the face of this transcendent stillness. 8. 9. Ali released his hand, turning abruptly. He slid out of the ropes, stepping onto the apron. The applause rose at once, a wave of sound that broke the decade-long narrative of Ali's bravado and Foreman's ferocity. But inside, a stillness remained. He paced toward the center, each footfall deliberate, boots tapping against the canvas. The applause softened to respectful nods and murmurs, as if the audience recognized something profound, that this was not a ring, but a confessional. In the very center, Ali stooped and peeled off his gloves, placing them gently on the canvas. The leather glinted under the lights, a humble symbol of a battle fought beyond fists. He pressed his palms together, fingers splayed across the fabric, and bowed his head. No one called his name. No one shouted. The microphone at the corner stand crackled. The announcer cleared his throat, voice catching, "Mr. Ali." Ali raised a finger to quiet the crowd. When he spoke, it was a low, unwavering whisper, picked up by the arena's mics and carried through every speaker. A real champion isn't defined by knocks or victories. It's what you do when the world expects you to celebrate. A hush fell anew, deeper than before. Even the echo of that final line took a moment to dissipate. Somewhere backstage, a producer stole a breath. The broadcast crew exchanged glances, uncertain who to cut to, and then who they could possibly cut to that could match this moment. Ali straightened and reached out to Foreman, extending his hand across the yawning gap of rope. Foreman, still gathering his wits, accepted the gesture. Their hands clasped, a visual covenant that outshone any title belt. The image of those two men, battered and bleeding, connected by flesh and hope, imprinted itself on every retina. Then Ali did the unexpected. He lifted Foreman's hand above his own in mutual triumph. The crowd rose, a single body casting shadows in the low wash of amber light, offering a standing recognition of something neither competitor could claim alone. Backstage passages echoed with startled footsteps as Ali slipped through the curtains. Reporters jostled for a word. Some camera operators followed with blinking lights. But Ali moved with purpose, head held not in arrogance, but in acceptance. He understood the true cost of this night had been paid, not in punches exchanged, but in old wounds reopened and new understandings forged. In his locker room, the air smelled of sweat and liniment. He sat at the edge of a wooden bench, towel around his neck, gaze fixed on the scuffed floorboards. A single voice asked, "What made you do that?" "Why not the knockout?" The question hung, unanswered amid the clatter of bottles and shuffling feet. Ali stood, unhurried, and reached into his duffel bag. He withdrew a folded photograph, grainy, black and white, of two boys in a dusty gym, fists raised in mock salute. One was him. The other was a friend long gone. He smoothed the crease gently, then returned the photo to the bag. Without looking up, he whispered, "Because no victory means more than one you share." He gathered his jacket and left the room, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Behind him, lights dimmed. In the arena, The crowd's ovation rolled on for minutes unmeasured, because this night belonged not to punches, but to a silence, the only sound capable of speaking louder than any bell.